Welcome to I Drink Your Podcast, where we drink and talk about movies from 2007.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker!
I don't remember seeing this movie.
What's your power? You don't got the power.
Keeps away the narwhals.
The only way to defeat a waffle is by making it a pancake.
This is one doodle that can't be undid, Holmes Gillett.
Now back to that ass.
Were you masturbating?
I drink your podcast. I drink it up.
Welcome back to another episode of the show. Today we are watching Grindhouse, a double feature. And joining me is Ben, Emily, Wesley, and our friend Dylan. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, Dylan, welcome back.
Hey.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back.
Yeah.
Is that a song?
Mr. Cotter.
Yeah, that's from Welcome Back, Mr. Cotter.
I don't know what that is.
God damn it.
And this is a Halloween episode, everybody. So, spooky stuff. So does anyone have anything spooky in their glass today?
Emily does. Emily's is really spooky.
I have such a spooky drink that I have two spooky drinks for this double feature.
Oh, that's just smart.
So first off, I have a bloody cherry in honor of Planet Terror in our Go-Go Dancer cherry. Pretty great. I have some pickles and sausage and cheese inside. And then
Wait, so is there cherry in the drink at all or just the name?
Ew.
no, that's just Bloody Mary, but I'm calling it Bloody Cherry.
Okay.
Come on, Wesley.
Well, after you described what's in it, I had to make sure that we don't need to check you into an insane asylum.
Yeah,
It
after
sounds
you-
like a sandwich.
When you called it a bloody cherry, it sounded like it had grenadine in it, and then you're saying, "Oh, it's got sausage." It's like,
No,
what?
that's what Matt would do because he puts grenadine in everything now.
And I'm going to call my drink a bloody cherry as well, which is just vodka and grenadine.
And then in my other hand over here, I have a pina colada. I had to remember what it's called, but it's a Dole Whip pina colada in honor of Kurt Russell's drink that he has in Death Proof. So double fisting today. Woo!
Yum.
Nice. No notes today. Just drinks.
Anybody else?
Dylan and I are sharing the same drink. Dylan, you want to share what it is?
Yeah, it's so cute. They just have two straws coming out of the same cup.
Yeah, yeah. Except I'm downstairs, so we had to put it like through a vent to drink it. So it's a long straw.
Yeah, the social distance fishbowl.
It is called a car crash, and it is a mixture of SoCo, amaretto, sweet and sour mix or sour mix, orange juice, and grenadine. Am I missing anything?
Nope, just a splash of grenadine. Just a splash.
Splish splash.
Nice. I actually was going to make the same drink, but then realized that I don't have a lot of that. So I made a Wesley car crash, which is it's bourbon, amaretto, lemon juice, and orange juice because I'm allergic to red dye 40, and most grenadine has red dye 40 in it unless you buy the expensive stuff.
And we all know what Matt has, just grenadine. All right, what are we doing today?
Tall glass of grenadine.
We are watching Grindhouse, everybody. So this one will not be so much an act structure as it will be movie, and then we'll talk about the trailers. So if you guys haven't listened to the show before, during the first half of our podcast, we'll be discussing and reviewing Grindhouse. And then the second half will feature a Battle of Twits, a creative competition pitting Ben against Dylan. Our current leaderboard for Battle of the Twits is Ben with 7, guests with 5, Wes with 4, Emily with 3, and myself with 2. And Ben with the sweep today will earn a reward.
I'm going for that sweep. I need my Halloween treat.
Beautiful. All right, so this is a Grindhouse double feature. Planet Terror, the first movie, was directed by Robert Rodriguez, which features Rose McGowan, Freddie Rodriguez, Josh Brolin, and Marley Shelton. Death Proof, the second movie, was directed by Quentin Tarantino, featuring Kurt Russell, Rosario Dawson, and Zoe Bell. Dylan, I know you know quite a bit about these movies. Could you give us an introduction?
Yeah, what the hell did you put me through today?
This was a movie that was very oddly put together by both directors who are huge 1970s like movie fans. We all know this about Tarantino if you watch anything he's made. And it was meant to be like the classic drive-in double feature look of a movie or a Grindhouse style movie. If you want me to, I can go a little bit into the history of a Grindhouse.
You should probably tell me what Grindhouse even means, because when you were like, hey, we're watching Grindhouse, I thought you were like, hey, we're watching a horror movie and it's like grinding horses or something, or houses.
Oh,
Grinding houses.
that sentence can't be unheard.
How many drinks do I have? 2.
HGTV coming this fall. Grindhouse.
Anyway, but then you were talking about these double feature things, and I'm like, wait, is this any genre? I was so confused.
Typically, the Grindhouse cinema was what today it's become straight to streaming, or better yet, straight to DVD or VHS of its time. They were movies that started in the 1920s, and they eventually kind of died out in the 90s. They were movie theaters that specialized in showing cheap, rushed horror movies or sexual films, not pornographic, but just, like go-go movies and stuff, like kind of oddly sexual movies, and exploitive films like Shaft, or, wow, that sounded like a porno. Like Shaft or Blackula, stuff like that, that were kind of big hits in the 70s. But what made them Grindhouse was the fact that the theaters they were shown in were theaters where the tickets were dirt cheap, and I guess they would get, as the day would go, they'd get a little bit more expensive, but they would also show movies 24/7.
Oh.
So it was whenever you wanted to go in, you could just go in, pay your ticket, and sit all day and just watch movies and just watch these styles of movies.
Ben's favorite thing to do in the world.
Yep, I grew up in the wrong era.
Yep, same here. Now, just to give you guys a couple of examples of like some stuff that today that would be considered Grindhouse is like if you guys have ever seen the Toxic Avenger,
nope,
or the Puppet Master movies.
Nope.
Those were made by Troma. Troma Films made the Toxic Avenger and a lot of other movies. And Puppet Master was made by Full Moon Productions. And the Full Moon was like the first big company to like do all straight to video. That's all they did was straight to video movies. But those were kind of examples. And some of like the classic directors of that time period were people like Herschel Gordon Lewis, Roger Corman, Frank Henenlotter. Frank Henenlotter was like one of the last ones. He made the classics Frankenhooker, which was kind of an odd one.
My favorite.
Yeah, it's a classic.
What?
Yeah, Frankenhooker. It was about a guy who took his dead girlfriend and then proceeded to kill hookers and put her back together with hooker parts.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Tim Burton remade it and called it Frankenweenie.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. I would also say that you could probably include early John Waters as like Grindhouse type
I recognize
movies.
that name, but otherwise I have no idea what you're talking about.
I would say Pink Flamingos, that's a Grindhouse movie. Because these were movies that were made very cheaply. They used very cheap film stock, whatever they could get their hands on. And that's also why they were Grindhouse, is because they only had so many prints. So as the movies would circulate across America, they'd get scratched up, stuff would go missing, the film would melt. So you had to, hence why in this movie you see missing reel. We apologize for this missing section because they just... something happened to it. Either they lost a reel in transport or just something happened and the movie caught on fire.
So that just explains this whole shitty double feature thing. Yes.
Yeah.
Dylan, before the huge switch to digital, you were a projectionist.
Yeah.
What happened if a reel got damaged while you were working? Like what would you do for the print?
Oh, Lord. It depends on what happened to the print. If it was one where it like stopped and it burned, you would have to splice out as little as you could and then splice it back together. And sometimes, again, because they're 34 frames a second, you can lose quite a bit before you're starting to go, whoa, huge time jump in missing material.
Yeah. Was it a piece of where, like you said, splicing? Are you saying taking an existing print or segments of film that were still good from other pieces and putting it into the main film reel?
No.
Or are you talking about like becoming the editor and cutting out certain frames and segments of the movie?
It would like being an editor, where you'd have to cut out a bit of the film, cut it back together, and then sometimes you'd see a little blip or something like that where you'd know, okay, something happened there. But also what would happen is they would create a lot of static electricity, the film does. And with that, the film would stick together. And so sometimes you would get the film would stick together and then it would stop the projector and burn the film. Or also like dust and stuff would get into the film and it would scratch it. It would scratch the print. And that's why also in this movie, you see like the little fake scratches and stuff like that because
The little
scratching.
Okay.
I mean, one movie overdid it compared to the other one.
Yes.
But
Yes.
So we'll talk about that.
Have your own.
I got bit.
Bit by what?
If I told you, you probably wouldn't believe me.
They're not living.
How's that?
They're not dead. The hell are the bodies?
They're gone.
They're not stopping.
The hell is going on?
Our first movie is Planet Terror, which has Cherry Darling, the go-go dancer, played by Rose McGowan, who quits her job and runs into her ex-boyfriend, El Rey, played by Freddie Rodriguez, at a local barbecue restaurant. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Muldoon and the military make a deal with a scientist named Abby for the biochemical known as Project Terror. Though things go awry, Abby releases the gas into the night, which turns those infected into disgusting zombies. When the gas reaches town, Dr. William Block, played by Josh Brolin, and his abused doctor wife, Dakota, played by Marley Shelton, treat the sickos. As things become worse, Cherry and El Rey work together to lead an accidental team of survivors to fight and find safety.
Yeah, I definitely put in here that they were zombies, but I don't think they were really supposed to be zombies. They were more focused on like the sick aspect of it. But, you know, I don't know. I felt like this was kind of a basic zombie movie.
Sure.
I would agree. And yeah, Freddie Rodriguez kept calling him throughout the whole movie, or El Rey. Kept calling him infected.
Because they still ate people like zombies, but they weren't necessarily dead or undead.
True.
so in your opinion, was this a horror movie?
I would say, yeah, like an action horror movie, I would say.
At what point is it horror just because of gore versus being actually scary?
You know, I would say in the world of horror, there's like different, like subgenres in there. I would say if it's gory and like this movie was, I'd still consider it a horror film because what's going on screen is horrific.
So I'll say.
But also, like today, I watched the movie Invisible Man, and I really enjoyed that movie. I would still call that a horror movie too, but it's more like a psychological horror movie. So there's just different subgenres within it. So I'd consider this like a gory action horror or comedy horror almost, because it did have some kind of funny moments.
Speaking of the gore, I wanted to talk a little bit about the horror makeup because I just throw out there, I hate horror. I don't really like it at all. Anytime anything happens, like jump scares, I just look away or cover my eyes. I just don't do it. But I watched a video all about the guy that did all of the makeup. And
Greg Nicotero?
Yes. And I was going through this video about all the stuff that they did with the melting faces, the bursting pus stuff, the prosthetics, blood spurting everywhere. They had animatronics and puppets in here too, which I was just blown away that they were actually using some of that stuff. And so when they were talking about it, they wanted it to be almost comical how ridiculous it was going to be. So whenever the guns were shooting the infected, they wanted to literally have blood spurting everywhere. And they wanted to see blood fountains and bubbling, even though it's not realistic. They wanted to make it as comical as possible. And they actually used medical pictures and journals to make it so it looked more like rashes and leprosy rather than having it be more zombie-like. So they wanted them to be infected, but still kind of human-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like not decomposed.
Right. And one of the stories, you know how Quentin Tarantino plays the guy that is trying to rape Dakota, the doctor lady?
Mm-hmm.
So they put together this whole puppet contraption to have him vomit out all of these, intestines and everything. And so they had a guy covered in green screen making that work. And I just, as gross as that was for me, watching it and how they broke it down was the coolest fucking shit I've ever seen. And then they talked about how they use condoms to fill with fake blood to have these blood bags burst. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of into this now.
The reason I know Greg Nicotero is from The Walking Dead. And I actually just this week, unbeknownst until now, didn't realize that Greg Nicotero had anything to do with this. But I had just recently, this week, started watching one of the more recent seasons. And I couldn't help but this morning when I woke up from a nightmare, because this movie actually gave me a nightmare for the first time in like 30 years. And I thought to myself, why did this movie get to me, but Walking Dead still does nothing? And it's really interesting to know that it's the same person, because the zombies in The Walking Dead are like, especially in some of those earlier seasons when they start to like develop like, oh, burned zombies, or, you know, one of my favorite was when they pulled a zombie out of a well and it was like completely bloated. Like I was just blown away by that. And I don't know if that was specifically Greg Nicotero, but I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on why this is so different from zombie movies today? Or I guess, did it affect you in the same way that it affected me? Like, this movie was gross.
Yeah. So Josh Brolin's inspecting that guy's tongue and then he just goes to town on it.
Oh.
I was like, right away, I was like, oh, I can't watch this, you know?
And then it bursts on his glasses.
Yeah. And it's like, he's not doing real doctor shit. And like the guy was able to talk the scene before. So I knew I was like, oh shit, we're in for some real fucking wacky ketchup packets splashing directly into the lens type.
Condom blood.
Yeah, exact condom. Yeah.
That's what I call ketchup packets.
Yeah.
With Nicotero, he actually trained under Tom Savini, who was one of the deputies, the deputy with the mustache that got his finger bitten off.
Was he the one that was ripped apart too?
Yeah.
He was quartered by the zombies real quick.
Yeah, that's Tom Savini. And he actually, a little history on him, he was a Vietnam vet who did photography. And what caused him therapeutically to get through, you know, the emotionalness of Vietnam was with the photographs and what he had seen, he put that into his work.
Wow.
So he tried to make it as accurate as he thought it could be with the makeup and everything. And if you've ever seen Dawn of the Dead by George Romero, they have a great scene in that movie where it's a zombie that gets the top of its head cut off with a helicopter blade. And you see like the blood streaking down its face. Really cool effect. And that was all Tom Savini's work. But Tom Savini was the one who was like, you want lots of blood. So he came up with the idea of like filling up a condom with like 3 times the amount of blood you would want to use and then make it explode. And that makes it look a lot better. But yeah, he's kind of like how Stephen King is like one of those inspirational writer for inspirational authors. Tom Savini is kind of like that for makeup artists. Like he is at the top, and he went, and a lot of people have trickled down from his teachings and just from watching his movies.
So speaking of condoms, there is definitely a sex scene in this movie. And
is there?
There is a scene where we are meant to believe that people are having sex. And they utilize what I will lay out for you to discuss, but what I think is one of the laziest ways to jump from something to another thing without having anything related to it, which is when they use the missing reel gag. And that is, in my opinion, very on purpose, because this is a movie that was not done on reels. This movie was not passed around, as Dylan explained to us, where they might have lost that reel. So how did you guys feel about them using that?
I mean, it's very much an homage to the Grindhouse movies, and that occasionally happening to the movies that they'd show. Now, it was super intentional because obviously they didn't lose a reel there. But the fact that it jumps not just to the end of the sex scene, but like to in the heart of like, it went from calmness to chaos just with a quick title card. And I really liked that because it saved that movie from being 2 hours long. You always complain, Wesley, about movies being too long. Like, that's a solution to it.
About the 3 hours that we just watched. Yeah.
No, it's cool. I liked how they pay homage to it. I mean, like,
homage.
It is it is written into the movie, so you could say it's lazy, but I think the way they did it and inserted it and kind of made it work from, I think what Ben was saying earlier, from calm to chaos, like that's so cool. My question to you, Wesley, is did they or did they not do it?
I'll be totally blunt. Once we got into that medical office and Brolin's assistant or whatever he was started pulling up medical images, I had to look away. I was like, okay, I'll keep watching this movie. But like every time I looked up, I'm like, nope, still not going to look. So I spent most of this movie not actually looking at the screen. I don't, and I feel the same way about sex in movies. Like it's just like medical gore. I can't look at it.
I'm glad you said it in movies.
Well, the whole missing reel thing, I'm pretty sure I read something about where this is something that actually happened to either Robert Rodriguez or Quentin Tarantino when they actually saw a movie where there was supposed to be a sex scene, but it jumped to something completely different. And so they wanted to not just pay homage, but just from their own personal experience. I thought it was really funny. Like this whole movie to me, I hate horror. I cannot emphasize how much I hate horror. But sitting on the couch and watching this movie and having it do that, I laughed. And it helped that I was kind of drunk while I was watching it, but I seriously laughed.
I had issues just technically watching this movie. I had to stop and start a couple times. I missed a couple scenes aside from the ones I just didn't look at. But the very end, doesn't Cherry have a baby?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Did I miss something where that might have been somebody else's?
Could have been.
No, that was there was the scene in the movie where El Rey is shot and he's like dying on a runway. Like he says to her something like, you know, you need to get out of here for the two of you. And she's crying, going, what do you mean? What do you mean? And he puts his hand on her stomach and goes, I never miss.
That's right.
To her.
I did not see that part of the movie.
Yeah, it was because throughout the whole movie, he kept saying, I never miss, I never miss. And you're kind of supposed to take that as, oh, yeah, it's like when he shoots a gun, he never misses. Well, yeah, with his love gun,
penis
he
doesn't
never misses.
miss either. Love gun?
His love gun.
Ketchup packets and love guns.
Dylan, I remember you saying in your description of Grindhouse that it's kind of similar to straight to streaming or straight to VHS DVD, like that we have now. I don't think of it like that because a lot of those straight to DVD movies have nothing to do with the quality of them. It's just they can't find distributors. And the same thing with straight to streaming now, with Netflix intentionally putting things straight to streaming. In my mind, it's more like the Asylum films, which is the production company that makes the blatant ripoffs of movies. Like the year Transformers came out, which was 2007, Asylum put out Transmorphers or Snakes on a Train, like movies to try to trick grandmas into buying the wrong movie for their grandkids.
I was going to say my personal favorite was the Pacific Rim ripoff called Atlantic Rim.
Yeah, which Mystery Science Theater did as part of their Gauntlet series.
Yep.
But another equivalent I see of these Grindhouse movies is also those sci-fi movies, like the sci-fi original movies that they make, where it's like Megalodon or Sharknado.
Mm-hmm. A lot of those movies are actually made by Asylum that then Sci-Fi buys them.
Okay.
I knew you weren't going to be talking shit about my Battlestar Galactica.
Since when are you into Battlestar Galactica?
Love it.
He's always been in.
I'm Matt.
I don't even know you, Matt.
I was going to say that the doctor that was in the movie that had all the weird pictures and visuals, I'm dorky enough where I listened to the director's commentary of this movie. And that is actually Robert Rodriguez's like personal physician who is like really into that odd medical stuff. And those were real pictures.
Gross.
Of some of those illnesses that was in that. So that's kind of like,
I thought you were going to say that those were actual pictures of Robert Rodriguez.
Speaking of Robert Rodriguez, weird story. So he dated Rose McGowan at this time. And so the whole Weinstein and Rose McGowan sexual assault issues and everything, Robert Rodriguez purposely cast Rose McGowan as Cherry in this movie to deliberately upset Harvey. And we can just assume that Rose McGowan told Robert Rodriguez all about the sexual assault. And Harvey was really upset. And according to Rodriguez, he actually said that Harvey slashed their ad budget for this project. And I just thought that was an interesting little hiccup because as we were sitting and watching this, Ben, Dylan were at my house and we were watching this and suddenly Miramax comes up and it says Harvey Weinstein and Bob Weinstein production or something. We all went, yikes.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
Can I talk about real quick? Saeed in his fascination for balls was my first turn off in this movie. Just like how he just went after balls. He like kind of became a good guy for a while and he's like still into ball. I was just like so over it the whole time.
You need to provide more context. We're big Lost fans, Matt, Wes, and I. Saeed is the Iraqi character
Shannon.
from the show Lost.
So that's the Dr. Abby or whatever scientist guy? Okay.
Yeah, I'm all set on. That's all I want is like the guy with
Matt,
the balls.
tell us more about balls.
Why?
Yeah.
Why does that need to be that? Well, I mean, that's like 80% of like a gory horror film for me, though, is they're just like, I feel like each time they show so much gore where they're like, this is going to gross people out. I think it's always like a slight at me because they're like just like pushing my buttons.
You take it personally?
Yeah. Or like the needle in the eye thing. Like that didn't connect with you.
No, I didn't see that part. But I will agree with you that when Saeed is grabbing the knife that he's going to use to cut the balls
his
off.
balls
I'm
knife.
like, oh, that's an
his
interesting
specialty
knife.
balls knife.
Yeah. And then he actually pulls out a different utensil, which is like 4 blades that like collapse in on each other. Like at that point in the movie, I was still into it. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Got some cool prop work. And then like it so quickly went to shit for me that I was like, I was disappointed with myself.
Yeah. You had a jar of balls. Come on.
That broke and then he slipped and fell into.
And
like,
then
face
tried
first.
to gather and put in his pockets.
Yeah. What's going on?
That was excessive.
He's got charm.
Is there anybody in this place you could vouch for to give me a ride home?
Fair lady, your chariot awaits. He's got style.
Do I frighten you? Is it my scar?
It's your car.
And he's got a set of wheels.
Is it safe?
Oh, it's better than safe. It's death proof.
To die for.
So moving on to our second movie, Death Proof. Stuntman Mike, played by Kurt Russell, stalks young women with his death-proof car, eventually killing 3. 14 months later, Stuntman Mike, now in Tennessee, driving a 1969 Dodge Charger, tails another group of young women, Abernathy, played by Rosario Dawson, Lee, and stunt woman Kim and Zoe, a group of women working below the line in Hollywood whose stock 1970s Dodge Challenger proves a worthy adversary.
I'm going to be honest. I hated this movie compared to the first movie. And like, I hate
Really?
horror. But then when the stunts happened, I was in. Like everything about this movie, I was just so lost. And maybe it's because I don't hate me. I don't really like Tarantino movies, like at all.
Wow.
Then that makes a lot of sense.
Because
I
he
was
directed
so
it.
bored.
Because this is definitely through and through a Tarantino movie.
Oh, yeah.
What do you mean by that?
It's lots of dialogue, very dialogue heavy, very referential dialogue as well, referencing a lot of pop culture, things that are very, very niche in their probably interest of other people.
Yeah, and also in Hollywood and working below the line and who they interact with and how they interact with those people, like particularly like them fucking the stand-in, you know? So it's very, very nuanced, detailed dialogue.
I couldn't tell you a single thing from the dialogue. I have no memory of it.
Wow. Because I'm the
I've
opposite.
got quite a few written down because I was very disturbed by most of it.
But then also with Tarantino movies, you end up having shocking bursts of action, which is kind of how this movie ends. But usually in his movies, they're more spread out than kind of just saved for.
Yeah.
I don't know. He felt very restrained in this movie, I felt, compared to normal Tarantino.
Mm-hmm.
And that might just be him trying to mimic that Grindhouse style. But I know he doesn't even consider this one of his movies.
Yeah.
Like when he talks about, I'm making 10 movies and then I'm going to be done. When he talks about the 9 movies he's already made, this is not one of them.
That does make sense in terms of feeling restrained too, because like at the very end, just a freeze frame, the end after they defeat him, like that was kind of like, okay. It almost seemed like he was just throwing his hands up being like, all right, we hit the movie requirement, we did it.
Yeah, I think he had like a minimum movie requirement, and so he filled the last like 2 or 3 minutes with just the camera bouncing back and forth between each one of the 3 girls, punching him and kicking him. And
Yeah.
that was awesome.
Well, I think when I was doing some research on this, he spent a lot of time co-directing with Robert Rodriguez, where they didn't identify Tarantino as like a co-director of Planet Terror. But because he spent so much time collaborating with Rodriguez, they just kind of said, he basically co-directed this movie. So maybe just with the time crunch, he just didn't have as much ability to make this his movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say with what Ben was saying, that it's a very like Tarantino-esque thing. Is Tarantino very much like, if you guys have ever watched anything by Aaron Sorkin, how he's kind of been known for walk and talk dialogue, like on the West Wing, where it's just these huge lines of dialogue and it's all done while people are walking to like from room to room to room.
But they were sitting in a bar.
Well, let me finish, Emily. I would say Tarantino is very famous for his table talk.
Mm-hmm.
In almost every movie he makes, he does a very long, drawn-out scene of people sitting at a table. And I would say, honestly, doing really good conversation that people have in real life. Like the scene in Reservoir Dogs where they're talking about what the song Like a Virgin is all about. It's kind of a dirty conversation, but it's kind of something that like nerdy people sitting around a table would talk about and kind of argue over, like, is this really how it is? And also, Inglourious Bastards probably had one of the most tense, actually probably 2 of the most tense table conversation scenes probably in my lifetime, with the very beginning of the movie and then the scene in the bar are like 2 scenes that are just like, you're just like grabbing the armrest going, oh my God, what's going to happen here?
Yeah, but the reason those ones in Inglourious Bastards work, whereas I feel the ones in Death Proof didn't, is that the Inglourious Bastards one were about building characters, and it was related to kind of a grander story of like World War II and the Nazis, whereas this just felt kind of meandering and not really with purpose. Like it wasn't building they're not building the characters of those women in the first bar just so that their death can have impact, because their death wasn't going to have impact.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about Stuntman Mike at that point and just providing victims for him. So I think when it's done really well by Tarantino, you do have really standout scenes like those 2 in Inglourious Bastards, the Django scene with Leonardo DiCaprio at the table. You've got the Pulp Fiction diner scenes.
Yep.
Both the beginning one with Bunny and then the one at the disco place where they do the dance.
Yep. Jack Rabbit Slims.
I think this kind of leads us back to talking about Weinstein, which is why I hated both these movies so much. Once I saw that from the beginning, it really forced me to not have that constantly in the front of the mind. When Death Proof started and this dialogue started happening, you make a great point, Ben. It didn't really develop characters. All it seemed to do was point out the industry, since they were talking about a movie star and how she's had to navigate her way through it. And I was so upset with the way that they did it and then made them laugh about it and make it lighthearted and make it acceptable with saying things like, just in the bar, like, do shots first, ask questions later, basically telling them to shut up until they're drunk and vulnerable, making them give lap dances to people, but only if they're drunk enough. And then later on in the second half of the first half of this story with the second group of girls, where they're all talking about exes and sleeping around with, like, sleeping with people in the industry to get where they need to go. And like Lee says that his perversion is watching her pee. That just felt so disgusting. And like, then all their friends are just like shaming each other for, like, your ex-boyfriend left you because you didn't give him sex. Like, that was a long conversation about like how it's her fault that because she didn't have sex with her boyfriend, that's why he cheated. That's disgusting. And then like even to the point of where Kim is talking about how she has a gun and she's like, oh, I want to have a gun because if I go down to my laundry room at midnight, I need to be protected. And they shame her and saying, well, don't go down to the laundry room because that's your fault for going down to the laundry room at midnight. And she says, well, fuck you. Like, I want to go whenever I want. So like they give these women some agency in kind of like owning this, but the way that they turn this like casual and like funny, and that's just how things are light on this. It was so hard to get through.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Wesley. That completely embodies kind of how I felt about this movie, speaking from a woman's perspective. And I think that it's partially what kind of Dylan was saying about these exploitation grindhouse kind of feeling. But I don't think it worked because there was no character in any of these women. I mean, obviously they had some sort of badassery, these stunt women doing these really cool things, but we didn't really identify with any of them, or maybe at least I didn't identify with any of them because there was no character development whatsoever. And maybe it's partially because they were really trying to model that 70s feel to it, but I felt like there could have been more potential. There could have been something better to make a statement rather than just letting this happen and have small little pieces of all the exploitation that was happening of women.
Yeah, so I know we're talking a lot about this Weinstein stuff, and I think with the hindsight of it being 2020 and the public now having knowledge of this stuff, this was not a secret within Hollywood at this time. And I really feel like this is Tarantino trying to normalize that type of casting couch behavior by shaming, because you can't say that Tarantino or anyone else who worked closely with Weinstein didn't know, which makes them complicit in this. So any not speaking out or attempts at normalizing this type of behavior, it just comes off as being icky. Like it's gross to think about Tarantino's role in this and not speaking up when he knew something was off.
Yeah. So this is actually timing wise is just under a week for the 3-year anniversary where the New York Times first put something out about Weinstein. So it's all recent, but I actually went back and, because I didn't really give a shit about this movie, started reading the whole timeline of how this whole Weinstein stuff played out. So yeah, it was just about 3 years ago, almost to the date as we're recording this. But one of the things that I found interesting in that whole laundry list of updates day by week, and it was over the course of almost 3 years. I think wasn't it March this year that he was actually...
I think so, because I think that's when the world started ending.
No, his trial ended, and I think he was sentenced in March, or he was going to be.
Yeah. But see, we don't remember it because of the world.
It was almost like 3 years of almost monthly, and at some points like 2 or 3 times a week, where there's new people coming forward, updated allegations, just constant bullshit. But one of the things that I found really kind of interesting about it was Quentin Tarantino at one point was quoted as saying like he knew enough that he should have done more. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't know if that makes it that much better, but like, yeah, just everybody that's involved with this, it's ridiculous.
I hate to play. I'm just now I'll give the forewarning. I don't think any of what I'm about to say is right. At all. Advocate. But I'm going to play the devil's advocate just a little bit. In the frame of reference of Harvey Weinstein, he's a pig, he's disgusting, may he rot in hell for everything he did. But this was also, he was at this time and before all this was before this all came out, he was like the man in Hollywood. He could ruin your career with a phone call. And so for some directors, since we're citing Tarantino all the time, with Tarantino, this was Harvey and Bob were the two men that saw something in Quentin and gave him his shot with Pulp Fiction and whatnot, and it made him into something. Now, I'm just saying that could be partially why maybe Tarantino didn't come out right away and completely disavow and say, I should have done something. Because at this time, again, Harvey had a lot of clout in Hollywood. Now, I'm not saying at all that this justifies anybody, not stepping forward right away and saying anything, but there was still that possibility of this guy could ruin me. This guy could completely ruin my career, and I don't necessarily want or need that right now. I'm just saying, I'm again playing devil's advocate, and I think it's horrible to think in that direction of career mindedness. But when you're trying to make it in one of the hardest fields to make it, and the guy at the very top could ruin you in a heartbeat, that's something that's going to go through your head.
And I don't think you're forgiving him in any sense. There were accusations that he did this to many people, shutting down their careers. Ashley Judd, I think, is probably the most prolific of those. So many people had all of these alleged interactions with him that many of them were told, because he was so powerful, that this is just not going to go anywhere. So you just shouldn't even try, which is why it all came to a head. And these allegations were from like the late 80s to the mid 2000 teens.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a new thing. And it's just the power of the industry that you can have that makes people think that I don't have a choice.
Let's think back to the Academy Awards when Shakespeare in Love won Best Picture, which was a Weinstein-made movie, beat Saving Private Ryan.
That was the first year, 1998. That was the first year that they ever used money, and they hosted parties where they were like, Saving Private Ryan is only the first 10 minutes. And they had a total campaign smear ad against them.
Thin Red Line's better than both of them. But let's get back to this movie.
Kurt Russell as a serial killer was just silly to me. But what wasn't silly to me were the stunts in this movie. I, again, was watching a video about all of these different stunts that happen. And all of the car stuff that happened, everyone was going 80 to 100 miles per hour the whole time. And that just blew my mind, because I was thinking, yeah, they're probably going like 50 miles an hour, something reasonable for me to comprehend. But no, Quentin Tarantino wanted them to look as real as possible and as terrifying as possible. So they would shoot 4 to 5 miles at a time with real cars from the 70s, where they had Buddy Joe Hooker and Terry Leonard driving, who are two really legendary stunt people, which I didn't know. I don't know who they are.
Sure.
But one of the stunts, in the first, I guess, murder spree of Kurt Russell's character, where he hits the women at night with his car and it flips a bunch of times, Quentin Tarantino basically told them, I want you to get a car to flip as many times as possible at night and stay on the county road the whole time. And then I want it to slide. And so they did it in one take. And Quentin wanted it to be at least 70 miles per hour.
Jesus.
And it landed 170 yards from where they blew it up, from when they caused the accident. I don't know. That just impressed me so much and made up for all of the shit that happened in this movie.
Man, that's really cool the way they did everything, but part of me just rolls my eyes at a director who wants an arbitrary miles per hour number. He's like, it needs to be at least 70 miles per hour.
To look reckless, to look in actually endangering people.
I know, but it's just as a director, there's no way he's the expert of these super special effects. I feel like I would rely more on a specialist, but it just...
Yeah, he's not Michael Bay.
A professional,
right?
No, it did look cool, and then obviously the car and Zoe on the hood, that was pretty amazing.
Mind blowing.
She really did that,
especially when the car slid around. I'm assuming that was not at 80 miles an hour, but just a stunt person hanging onto the front of the hood like that. I was just very impressed, and I think kind of opposite of Grindhouse, a lot of the special effects were done practically, which
opposite
is
of Planet Terror.
Yeah, opposite of Planet Terror, and what is more typically Grindhouse, right? The gore and the packets and stuff.
Not necessarily. I would say both of these movies fit within that kind of genre of exploitive movies. This is an exploitive. Death Proof is an exploitive movie of car chases and
But wouldn't you say it's more B movie in terms of production? Like, wouldn't you
No,
say
B movie was way better.
Stop. Not B movie, but like a B dash movie. Like, because like that's interesting that they were going 80 miles an hour, because you'd think if they were to make this in the 70s, it would be like 40 miles an hour. And then they sped the footage up and then did as much as they could to like make it look dangerous.
Well, not necessarily. A lot of those movies, they did film them that way. Because also, if you think about it, yeah, it's scary, but you don't think Tarantino talked to those stunt drivers and said, this is what I want. Can you guys do it? And if they didn't say, no, we can't do it, do you think Tarantino would go, fuck it, do it anyway? No. He would say, if they would have said, no, we can't do it that fast,
I think he'd fire them and then get a new guy and be like, I'm going to get a better
I watched this video, and literally it's all these conversations with him and the stunt drivers and like collaborating on what is manageable and what could they do, and trying to push the boundaries to make it look really real and obviously dangerous and scary and thrilling. But, you know, he wouldn't have asked them to do anything that they couldn't do. Like, they all had a really strong relationship, the way that they were talking about each other and sharing stories and everything.
Okay.
Right away at the beginning credits of this, they list Zoe Bell as herself. And I didn't know who that was. And I spent most of the film going, there's got to be a reason for this. And then when she hops on that hood and starts driving down the road with 2 belts in her hand and starts getting hit, and then like loses the belts and is then like holding onto the grill and holding onto the hood, I was like, holy shit, this girl kicks fucking ass. So yeah, I was super, super in love with how strong of a character he let her be, and literally as herself, not as a character. I thought was a super cool thing, but it actually made me look up kind of where Zoe Bell has been. And naturally she's worked with Tarantino a lot. She started out, she was the main stunt double for Lucy Lawless in Xena, because it was filmed in New Zealand where she's from. But she got her big break with Tarantino in Kill Bill, where she started doing a lot of stunts, but quickly they realized this girl should be the main stunt double for Uma Thurman. So then she immediately started training in the martial arts that Uma Thurman was having to learn, and like being her official stunt double. And then she obviously did Planet Terror, Death Proof. She did a lot of the stunts in Inglourious Basterds, which we've already talked about. She was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, not necessarily doing stunts as much, but she was the stunt coordinator, which I actually just watched that movie recently, and I was like, oh my God, that's her.
She's like my new hero.
I know, thank you.
Yeah,
that's kind of what I was just going to get to. Is I just wanted to.
She's awesome.
Just wanted to shout out Zoe Bell.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Let's talk about the trailers in this double feature. And I'd like to start. We can have just a little, shout out. But like, I loved the authentic Mexican food sandwich commercial.
The Acuna brothers.
It got me hungry. No, for real. What's your favorite movie from the trailers? I'd like to.
2 of these trailers were already made into full-length movies, so I'd rather not talk about those. Machete and Hobo with a Shotgun were both ideas that those directors ended up making into full-length movies.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Machete was directed by Robert Rodriguez with Danny Trejo.
Yep.
And then Hobo with a Shotgun was made into a 2011 movie.
They didn't do a fake trailer for Hobo with a Shotgun in this.
Just to clarify, Hobo with a Shotgun was only screened for the Grindhouse prints that were in Canada.
Ah, okay.
That's why we're confused.
All right.
Real quick, Machete, I think it's amazing that character came from Spy Kids.
Yeah.
Well, the director of Planet Terror directed Spy Kids.
Oh, no. I understand why. I just still think that the fact that gory of a movie came from Spy Kids just, I don't know, tickles me in a way.
For me, my favorite trailer was Don't, just because I love Edgar Wright so much, and I love how he cuts things and he does things that you're not quite expecting all the time, and how it matches up really nicely with everything. Although the werewolf women of the SS, just so out there, something that I was not expecting in the least bit, that I did laugh my ass off.
Werewolf boobs.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wish movies would do this more often. I can think of this one and Tropic Thunder as being 2 examples of doing this really well. And when it's a movie about Hollywood, I think we should see more of these. Like, why didn't Tarantino do some more trailers ahead of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood using the characters he had in that movie? Like, it can be so fun and just a little add-on stuff that we can see and all laugh at.
Yeah.
It's world building and character building.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Tropic Thunder one is probably the best for me because within the first 5 minutes, and it doesn't feel like you are forced to start watching the movie yet, but I already know who these people are. I don't need a backstory. I don't need scenes with them. Like, I get it. They're actors, and this is the kind of thing they do.
And the transition when I saw Tropic Thunder in theaters from actual commercials to the booty sweat commercial, I about lost it because I couldn't tell if it was fake or not.
I think we saw that together because I remember doing the same thing. Like, what? Because they're like, go drink booty sweat at the concession stand.
These are just a few of our incredible thoughts.
All right, so my observations, I mean, it's pretty clear. I wasn't real thrilled about this movie. So here's just a little bit of a walk down my thought path. Testicles. And then it went downhill from there. You know what? I had more, but I think that's probably good enough.
Yeah, that's the capper right there. Okay, dad joke time. Dad joke. Her stage name is Cherry Darling, but her birth name is Peg.
Oh, man.
That's so perfect for my rave today.
Good.
Well, I have a microphone and you don't.
So you will listen to every damn word I have to say!
That is what I wanted to rave about. How stupid it is that they gave Cherry Darling a gun for her peg leg and it worked. She would just like randomly use her leg to shoot the zombies, and apparently, I don't know, I'm just assuming from her dancing background as a go-go dancer that that's how it worked. But that was so stupid, and I loved it. It was the one part of this movie that I'm like, yep, I can suspend my disbelief for you. This is incredible. But overall, this movie, I hate horror movies. I've said that like 5 times today. I hate disgusting body horror. I have tons of visceral nightmares all the time that keep me up, so this did not help. But because Ben and Dylan hung out with me and we got drunk and we had fun, this made this viewing tolerable. And also Rose McGowan having a gun for a leg, that also helped. So
also the conversation of, is it Kegels that allows her to pull the trigger?
Right, I do remember that. Yes, we made the assumption that the fact that she's using Kegels to pull the trigger is probably how it works.
That's where you flex your butt muscle, right?
Let's save this for the next podcast.
So Dylan, what did you think of the movies?
I'm probably the one who's probably got the better review of this movie. I really enjoyed this when I saw this in 2007 at the Lakeville movie theater on the monster screen with about 5 people in the theater watching it with me. I got a kick out of it. I got the jokes of it. Now in retrospect, with a lot more of like what we talked about today, yeah, it's probably not as good as I remember it being, but I still think it's a good time to like what we did on that Saturday. We, sat, had a few drinks, and watched a dumb movie. And that's kind of what this movie is there for. It's just there to be something stupid, to have it on the background and talk.
And that's Grindhouse, both of them. That's the kind of overview of the review.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Which one did you like more, Dylan? Just out of curiosity.
We kind of had this conversation on that Saturday, and I kind of prefer Death Proof, just because I feel that it itched more of the
that tickles.
It itched more of the scratch of like being a good serious movie rather than goofy.
So you like Death Proof more?
Yeah, I like Death Proof more. It felt more like an actual movie than just, hey, let's put a bunch of stuff on the screen that blows up and looks gory.
Yeah, I'm Team Dylan here. I liked Death Proof minus all the fucked up shit to women.
Which was the entire movie.
Right. Right. Well, not the end.
Before we get into our battle today,
Battle of Twits.
we are going to have our components, Ben and Dylan, give each other a director of their choice that they're going to have to answer one of the questions with. So, Dylan, as the guest, why don't you tell Ben what director he's got to use for his question?
All right. I'm going to give you one of the greatest children filmmakers of all time, Jim Henson.
And Dylan, I'm going to give you frequent Adam Sandler collaborator Dennis Dugan.
Fuck you.
Battle of Twits.
And now it's time to play Battle of Fighting and Gross Stuff. I will pose 3 rounds of questions to our Ben and actually somewhat of an expert Dylan. Let them try to convince me who has the most dust on their digital film. And with the help from my judges panel, thank you, Emily and Matt, we will decide who is death proof and who is a planet terror and a disappointment. The winner of each round will get to pretend that they are a badass woman, otherwise known as 1 point. Second place gets to have someone pop a boil in their face. I will be more easily persuaded by the more grotesque and things that make me go, but why? Answers. Also be creative and funny, please. So once the credits roll, we'll tally the kill count and update our leaderboard. So are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Ooh, sir. All right. Ben's already starting out with a lead. Nothing entices me more than having 2 movies in one. Hooray for a 3-hour movie block. That's sarcasm. But at least there was a little bit of variety in style by having 2 different directors. So your opponent has given you a director, and now you have to choose another director and a filmmaking style to create a double feature and briefly explain what each movie is about. So, Dylan, Ben gave you Dennis Dugan. So let's hear who your companion director is and these movies.
All right. Well, I went into the extensive catalog of Adam Sandler films and came up with Stephen Brill, who directed Little Nicky. And he and Dennis Dugan are going to make a double feature, one called Heavyweights 2, and the other will be called Lightweights. One is going to be a screwball comedy where that is Stephen Brill making Heavyweights 2, where we now get Kevin James as Jerry Garner and Chris Rock as Roy. And they must once again take on Tony Perkis and his evil son, White Goodman, from Dodgeball. And the other movie, directed by Dennis Dugan, will be a drama from the perspective of White Goodman and Tony Perkis, of their tragedy of them losing once again to those fat losers, and the tragedy of them being perfect specimens against them. And here's the kicker. Since Ben Stiller is too expensive now to get him to play White Goodman and Tony Perkis, we will now get Adam Sandler in White Goodman makeup to play the titular bad guys, or our loser heroes of the other dramatic film. Lightweights versus Heavyweights 2.
Wow.
There's my double feature. It's going to be 2 movies from 2 different perspectives of the same idea from different perspectives.
Yes. The double feature.
I only recognize Dodgeball, so Matt and Wesley will have to explain some things to me.
There are some good ones there. I like that idea. That sounds pretty good. All right, Ben. Dylan gave you Jim Henson.
Yeah, so recently I've been trying to decide what movie to watch with my daughter for Halloween. She's 9, and I realized that there's a distinct lack of transitional Halloween horror movies for children. So Jim Henson and George Miller are going to create a children's horror movie double feature. So Jim Henson is going to direct a movie that leans heavily into the tropes of the slasher genre. There's a quote-unquote killer on the loose at a summer camp where a group of children and Muppets are in danger of being the next victim. This would be an introduction to jump scares for children and would provide some of the same twists and turns that we typically see. George Miller will direct a movie that leans more into psychological horror as a group of animals face their darkest fears in a possessed barn. This would be an introduction to possession and haunted house movies for children.
Wow.
Good Owen Wilson.
I don't really have any questions. I just want to see these things and have Jim Henson come back from the dead.
I think George Miller is cool. I wasn't very familiar with his work, but like his Happy Feet 2, and then Mad Max Fury Road. What a fucking eclectic son of a gun. That's cool.
On to question 2. Planet Terror uses a very meta storytelling device by upfront letting the audience know that some of the film reel is missing. So what I want to know is, what movie do you think would have been most improved with a missing reel title card, meaning that some scenes were missing? And what parts of the movie would be cut, and why does it make the movie better? And we're going to start with Ben this round.
Pearl Harbor. 3 hours and 3 minutes long. Why? Especially when the actual Pearl Harbor stuff ends at around the 2-hour mark. This does not need to be a comprehensive retelling of that part of World War II. So after the attack on Pearl Harbor and after FDR's Day of Infamy speech, the survivors are seen attending a memorial service for those who died in the attack. Then, missing reel. We come back and Ben Affleck, Kate Beckinsale, and the young child are standing in the graveyard looking at Josh Hartnett's tombstone.
Spoilers.
We see Ben Affleck briefly raise the child who's named after Josh Hartnett's character before hopping into a plane and flying off into the sunset. Credits. You basically cut out the last third of the movie, that's the Doolittle raid sequence, and all of the melodramatic Josh Hartnett death stuff, which just gets overwrought in that entire third act. This makes the movie better by tightening the focus to just the movie's namesake event and keeping the movie at a much more endurable 2 hours and 10 minutes, Wesley.
I mean, we're still talking quite a heavy number there, but yeah. The 3 hours, it felt like the 3 hours and 3 minutes. That 3 minutes part was definitely directed towards me, and it worked. Dylan, let's hear your answer.
All right. Now, first and foremost, I'm just going to give Emily, and I'm sorry ahead of time, but I am picking the Jim Henson classic, Labyrinth. One of my favorites growing up as a child.
Emily, you might just want to take your headphones off.
I actually might start crying. I'm so sad right now.
Emily, again, I love this movie, but there is one moment that I'm sorry. The missing reel would be after Sarah, played by a 15-year-old Jennifer Connelly, takes the bite of the peach and starts to oddly hallucinate and says, "Everything is dancing." That's where the reel would then go missing. This is the part of the movie where we get another David Bowie song, which is by far the worst David Bowie song, and I'm a huge Bowie fan. It's the worst Bowie song in the whole movie, where we are now at a masquerade ball where Sarah, and again, 15 years old, is being macked on by David Bowie at a masquerade ball, which makes absolutely no sense with the plot of the movie at all. It slows the movie down to an absolute halt, when easily we stop and have our main character has a huge acid trip. Why do we need a music video with David Bowie and Jennifer Connelly in a masquerade ball with a bunch of laughing oddballs?
Because it's awesome.
Shh, it's my turn. By her saying that line before the ball, we all know now that she's been drugged and that she is about to forget her mission to save her little brother Toby. This scene just feels not needed in the grandness of the film, where we've already seen all these beautiful puppets and monsters. I think it was just a scene added to make the runtime a little bit longer. And the reel would cut back in where she is now in her bedroom being seduced, and she goes, "It's all junk. I need to find Toby." And everything starts falling apart around her, where now we find out she has gotten to the best scene in the movie, them laying siege of the Goblin City. So there you go. Labyrinth, the masquerade ball, lose that reel.
I need to step out for this question. I cannot judge this one. Wesley and Matt, you're on your own for number 2.
Okay.
I was going to throw it to you, Emily, to see if you had any follow-ups, but I don't want to. No triggers.
I have no follow-ups other than I'm going to punch you next time I see you, Dylan.
Too partial.
Blame Ben. He told me to do this one.
Well, that's your fault. You listen to your opponent.
And can I just say again, I'm sorry, Emily. Don't look at me so pissed. You look really pissed off.
I mean, you knew what you were doing, Dylan.
I'm fine. Fuck you.
Perfect segue to question 3. in a time before we were all socially distant and we could go see movies in theaters, or even further back when you would rent movies on VHS from Blockbuster, we used to watch trailers before movies.
Yes.
This movie has some of those, but I want you to make another. So please create a Grindhouse style horror movie trailer. So Dylan, coming hot off question 2.
Yep. Coming in hot, baby. My movie, I'll give you the title after it's all done. We open on a dark and stormy night during Yom Kippur weekend, where we see rabbis chanting and doing a weird thing, and then we see the tombstone of Ruth Bader Ginsburg being struck with lightning, huge explosions, and the little tiny 87-year-old woman rising from the grave. She is now going to get the justice that so needs to be given out to the people that have done her wrong. And not only is she the notorious RBG, but she's also bringing back from the dead the notorious BIG as her executioner. I give you the movie Ruth Bader Ginsburg, where now she is dispensing her own version of justice with the notorious BIG, where one of our pivotal scenes will be she confronting Donald Trump and pronouncing him guilty as he is dancing to the song by the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Heads Will Roll, as we see the heads of both Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh rolling past Donald Trump before Ruth Bader Ginsburg takes out her gigantic spiked gavel and puts it through Donald Trump's skull.
So who'd you vote for? So this movie had to be conceived, filmed, released, all between the time of RBG's death before November 3rd.
The Grindhouse movies were shot quickly and cheaply.
You know what? That's a great point.
Dylan, so I have one question.
Sure.
At the beginning, you said they're chanting and doing a lot of weird stuff.
Yeah, that's a quote I have written down.
Is that normal Judaism, or is that like
they're performing?
What's your
throughout
take
this movie? You will
that?
be finding out that during Yom Kippur, it's not just a day of atonement. It is a day to potentially bring back somebody who has been unjustly criticized or something done to them in an unjust manner. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, on her deathbed, said, "Do not pick another judge until the presidential election is over."
I see. So she's been wrong, so she can come back. All right, no more further questions.
Ben, let's hear your movie trailer.
Interior church. Priest stands at a pulpit. Those who are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Cut to exterior. Hundreds of bright lights descend from the sky. A close-up shot of a little girl holding her mommy's hand. Look, mommy, look at the bright lights. It must be God. Pan out. It's just the little girl holding her mom's severed hand. The lights continue to descend until they reach Earth. There is general panic as people have vanished from where they were standing. Then the light hits the Earth, and we hear a loud screech. Title card, Velociraptor. Back from title card, a news special report. 29% of the world's population has disappeared without a trace, and in their place, millions of velociraptors have arrived. We see a redneck in his cabin. Some are calling it the end of days. Smash cuts of explosions and velociraptors eating people. Back to the redneck. I prefer to put my faith in a higher power than all of that, as he taps his gun. Smash cuts of more explosions and gunfights, and a shot of a velociraptor who's managed to learn how to shoot a machine gun. Then black. Velociraptor. We come back from black. Sound of a door being kicked open over the title card. Shot of a man entering through the door, backlit and armed head to toe for a gun battle. You hear a woman say, "Thank God, you're here." His long hair and beard give him away immediately. I appreciate your thanks. He takes a toothpick out of his mouth and flicks it into the wall where it sticks. It's the shape of a cross. Smash cuts of Jesus, kicking all sorts of ass, punching velociraptors in the face. Think a more graceful John Wick. His movement is beautiful and flowy. He leaps through the air, arms outstretched, as he fires at velociraptors on each side of him. The montage is cut so that each shot increases in speed until it hits black. we come back from black to a sweeping shot of an army of thousands of velociraptors standing before one velociraptor on a balcony in front of a giant flag. Quick zoom in over the crowd to a close-up of the velociraptor leader and his tiny little mustache. All of the velociraptors screech in unison. Title card, Velocirapture.
Love it.
I know that I've heard Velociraptor, and maybe it's just from our years.
That's because I've told you this idea. I've had this idea for years.
Because I know that me and your brother used to hang out in college and just come up with like Mega Crow versus Prism Shark.
This is mine, and I'm finally putting it to use. I'm getting this bitch made.
My only other question is a more graceful John Wick. Have you seen those movies?
Have you seen Jesus with a gun?
Ask and answer.
If anything, that's just a great descriptive way to describe something. If John Wick is the most graceful being on Earth, and then something's more than that, your imagine has to be going wild.
Question 1. Your opponent gave you a director to smash up with another director of your choice to make a double feature like the Grindhouse movie that Dylan made me watch. Dylan, I like the idea of who your collaborators are, but the connection of them seemed to be more about who the directors were and not as much the movies themselves. And the movies themselves kind of seem to be a little too similar. Ben, I think that your pairing was really smart in being so different, like the directors are so different themselves, and figuring out how to utilize each director's style in the other one's movie, that I thought that was really smart. So that one's going to Ben. Question 2, what movie would basically cut some stuff by using the missing reel title card? Ben, you said Pearl Harbor, which, I mean, you know my Achilles, the 303 again still stands out. I think you made a really good point for how it improves a movie that would drag on without really taking away from it. Dylan, to the same kind of extent, it didn't seem like what you were going to cut really saved the story, and more so saved the flow of the story from how you described it. And also, Labyrinth is only 140 minutes already. So that one is also going to Ben. Question 3. Creating a new Grindhouse style horror movie trailer. Dylan, this was so topical, and I think we get it. Like it's I liked it. You really did swing for the fences. I liked it a lot. It was great in the moment and very impassioned. But it was more of a plot description of an entire movie versus where Ben took it from start to finish with screen directions and was really on it the entire time about making this a trailer and not telling us exactly what happens in the entire movie, as well as just, I mean, I know Ben and I have talked about this and for years, but hearing a more fleshed out like idea of what would happen in this movie made me very happy. So that one is also going to go to Ben. So Ben with the sweep this week, which if I remember correctly from the top of the show, that means that Ben has hit our magical number 10, right?
Yeah.
What do you want, Ben?
Wow.
Yeah, this is exciting. I've been thinking about this for a while of what I want. And what I want is inspired by a video Emily sent out to the group of us a while back, which is back in the late 80s, early 90s, they had to record personal ads for dating like websites on VHSs, and they had to go into a studio and record like a pitch of themselves to a potential mate. And then, you know, you'd go to the matchmaking place and you'd watch a bunch of videos and find the one you wanted to be with. I really want Wes and Matt to make me.
Oh, I just
Not
realized
me?
Dylan won the first question.
Then it's coming next week, bitch.
Whoa, did he also win 2 and 3?
Yeah, actually, look at that last week.
So now my ideas don't sound too bad, do they?
No, they still do. And I'm mad at you for making me watch these movies. I'm just kidding, Dylan. I'm just kidding.
Hey, You know what? It's your fault because you guys made a podcast about movies made in 2007.
Yeah, but if you weren't our friend, we probably could have skipped this one.
Well, why'd you become my friend then?
I ask myself every day.
Yep.
Well, congratulations, Ben. Really nice job, Dylan. Honestly, they were really fun answers. They really were. I had a great time. Except for the Labyrinth one. I hate you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you guys are still listening to this Grindhouse double feature episode, we want to thank you. Dylan, thank you for being on the show. Do you have anything you'd like to plug or talk about?
Yeah, if anybody uses Facebook anymore, I always do 31 Days of Horror for the month of October.
Okay.
Where now I'm writing up little reviews of movies and or TV show seasons that I've watched. The last one I wrote on was on the last season of American Horror Story 1984. I thought it was pretty good. So if anybody uses Facebook and you want to look me up,
there should be a bunch out too, because this is coming out at the end of October. So there'll be 27-ish days of those. So that'll be exciting.
Yep.
Well, that's been Grindhouse.
Yeah.
Thanks,
and
everybody.
Just for everyone's amusement, As the World Goes Down by David Bowie is a great song. So, as the world goes down, fuck you, Dylan.
Wow.
The end.
Wow. Ben, what do we have happening next week? What is happening next week?
We may have that soundbite in our opening credits next week. That's what we might have.
Holy shit.
Wow.
So next week, if we come back next week and Emily's not in jail for murdering Dylan, we'll be watching Knocked Up, and we'll be having some podcast friends on, and their names are Rashawn and Carmela, and they're from the podcast When Cinephiles Attack, which I highly encourage those of you to check it out before they're on next week. It's a very entertaining show.
They're
Four friends
awesome.
kind of argue about movies. It's really fun.
It is really, really great. And I've never seen Knocked Up, so this should be fun.
Beautiful.
Wow. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dylan.
Bye.
I still love you.
Bye.
I don't. Bye, everyone.